Thank you very much. What I will talk about this morning is the issue of groundwater and how groundwater is being managed in what is the most international river basin in the world, the Danube River Basin. This presentation has been prepared by Igor Lischka, and the work has been done by the task group associated with this, and you'll have a further presentation tomorrow morning from Andreas Scheidblader, which I would encourage you to attend for further details. Very quickly, for those of you from outside the region is a very dynamic, very diverse region. It's one that involves more countries than any other river basin. Begins, as you see in the top left-hand corner, in Germany, in the Black Forest. Donaueschingen flows downstream through alpine territories, through the Pannonian Plain, through the Iron Gates, which you see on the far right there, and the ends in the Black Sea between Romania and Ukraine, the water of the Danube flowing there. It's the river itself, the Danube, but the river basin is one that is made up of literally hundreds of significant tributaries, smaller streams, water bodies that contribute to the Danube River Basin. And it is this basin concept that is embedded in the Water Framework Directive, which I'm going to talk about now. It is clear that this region, if you are to manage water resources, you have to do so in a coordinated, cooperative way. You have to have mechanisms to discuss together with your neighbors about aspects of water management. And that, very fortunately, is the case in the Danube River Basin. In the year 1994, the Danube River Protection Convention was signed in Sofia by the countries of the Danube, committing them to protection of water resources and ecological resources of the Danube River Basin. It was a commitment that the countries made. They made the commitment to work together to ensure that water is used effectively within this region and to use sustainably within this region. And as I mentioned earlier, the Danube River Protection Convention incorporates both surface waters and groundwaters, which, as I indicated as well, was not necessarily on equal footing. Groundwaters were certainly a second-class citizen to surface waters in some of the activities that took place within the region. Fortunately, that has changed, and you, as I say, will hear from the chairperson of our task group later on in the conference. But it is the case that there is water problems in the Danube River Basin from the point of view of water quality. We have significant nutrient, hazardous substances problems, significant in terms of the impact locally, not necessarily more significant than other large river basins of our nature in developed countries of the world, but nonetheless problems that have to be addressed. We've been very fortunate in this region. In the year 2000, the EU Water Framework Directive came into force, and you heard earlier from Walter Kling how the region has developed in terms of its relation to the European Union. Our convention involves the active participation of all the countries of the Danube River Basin. And I'm very proud to say that here. I see many of the people in this room who are part of our expert groups in one form or another who are actively involved in the work of the Commission on behalf of their country, but on behalf of coordinating those efforts at a Danube River Basin level. You see at the bottom, though, the European Union. The European Union is a contracting party to the Convention because the water of the Danube flows outside the EU territory into and across countries such as Serbia, which are not yet part of the EU. The EU Water Framework Directive, despite the fact that it is not legally binding for non-EU member states, has, in the context of the work of our Commission, been taken on as the mechanism under which we will develop strategies for addressing water issues in context of the Danube River Protection Convention, but using the legal framework of the Water Framework Directive. The ICPDR is what we call the coordinating mechanism to make sure that those elements of the Water Framework Directive are able to be brought into place. And it was a decision of each of the governments of the Danube River Protection Convention contracting parties that the ICPDR would provide that function of the coordination. Coordination at the level that makes sense. It makes no sense to manage local waters from an office in Vienna, which I happen to be sitting in, and we don't certainly have the capabilities, for any of you who know the size of our secretariat. Those decisions which should be and need to be made at a local level should be made there. Those decisions and actions which should happen at a bilateral level should happen there. Those decisions that should happen at a sub-basin level, such as the Sava River Basin, which involves the 5 countries of the Sava River Basin, should be managed in that context. But they should all be done in the overall context of the Danube River Basin actions, and it is that responsibility and that work that is done in the framework of the ICPDR. As I mentioned, it is a commitment of governments to this work that is the basis under which it is happening. But it can't happen, doesn't happen, will never happen if it does not involve other actors who need to be a part of those discussions. Non-governmental organizations, other international or intergovernmental organizations, businesses, cooperative activities for certain parts of the region. You see here the list of 21 stakeholders or active observers, formal observers in the work of the ICPDR. All these institutions, you see the European Water Association, you see IWA, you see the Sava Commission, the Black Sea Commission, are contributing to the work of our expert groups in one form or another. They participate in our meetings, have open access to our meetings, and bring their expertise within. And I would like to emphasize, without the valuable contribution of these groups, we would not be in the position we are today of having good cooperation and good expertise in managing the water resources of the Danube River Basin. Here you see the organizational structure of the ICPDR, and this is that there is the commission itself, the heads of delegation, one representative of each country, usually the minister, deputy minister, or the director of water of the country. In the case of Serbia, it's Alexander Pranovic, who I mentioned earlier, from the Directorate of Water in Serbia, who is the head of delegation, represents Serbia in the commission. There is expert groups, though, which involve experts from the country who do the work of preparing the documents and the activities. The River Basin Management Group, which coordinates the overall implementation of the river basin management. But it is supported, and part of the structures then are on relation to monitoring, which is a fundamental component of any work of a river commission. You have to know what the status is before you can take actions. We have a monitoring program that is organized in the monitoring and assessment group. We have a group dealing with pressures and measures, those actions that need to be taken to address the problems. We have a flood protection group as well. We have an information management GIS and a public participation group, and we have various task groups dealing with specific topics. And groundwater, as I mentioned earlier, on the basis of the conference that was held here in 2007, there was a task group that was dealing with these issues, and the work needed to be done on the implementation under the Water Framework Directive, which does include groundwater. The work of the Commission over the past 10 years, or just 11 years now, since the adoption of the Water Framework Directive, much of our activities, although the Convention has all the same basic principles in it that are in the Water Framework Directive, we have been explicitly using the Framework Directive as the tool to get the basic elements of a management plan and a management system for the Danube region. We have now, and I'm very, very pleased and proud to say, completed the Danube River Basin Management Plan, which is this CD-ROM contains the plan. It's a document which outlines the status of waters in this region, and that is one of the goals of the Water Framework Directive, is to understand the current status of waters. It introduces the analysis of where the problems are, where the status of water is not reaching the good status that is required by the directive, includes elements related to public participation, and stipulates those actions that need to be taken to get that water into a good condition, or that water body, both surface water or groundwater body. And the document, I have a few copies of this if anybody would like this, or if I run out, you can give me your card and I'll get it sent to you. It's also downloadable from the ICPDR website. This is the important stage of implementing the Water Framework Directive. It's the important stage of saying what's going to be done. We're now in the second most important stage, which is actually doing what we said we were going to do, undertaking those actions to get the water in the condition that it should be. Groundwater, as I mentioned, is a very important part of that. It is legally embedded in the convention. Groundwater is not, it's treated, it is a river basin, and the surface and groundwaters are a part of that system. In the work of the Water Framework Directive, we defined the groundwater bodies, analyzed the pressures and impacts on them, provided a monitoring network, and one of the key elements was establishing a monitoring network for the groundwater, setting up the elements of the River Basin Management Plan, and establishing what we call the pressures, or the Program of Measures, the POM, for those areas where the groundwater or the water body does not meet the good conditions that it should have. This work has been reinforced with other directives, the Groundwater Directive. I won't go into, I guess, further details of this now. I think Johannes Grad will later on today give you further details of this. But it provides a reinforcement of the legal basis of the Water Framework Directive and specifically establishes elements of work needed related to groundwaters, and it particularly related to the chemical status. As I mentioned earlier, the work of the ICPDR is focused not on the local activities. Each local activity helps make the bigger picture, but what we are working on trying to ensure is that the transboundary relations are effective in ensuring that water bodies that are going across transboundary areas are being managed in a good way. We have then identified in the Danube River Basin Management Plan those 11 groundwater bodies that are transboundary in nature, usually bilateral, but in some cases involving up to 4 countries, where the groundwater body is shared by different countries. You see the map with those on them here. This is a representation of the locations in the basin where at an international level we are working. What I would like to stress, however, that this international cooperation is reinforced with the work at a national level that has to be done. At each national level, all the groundwater bodies had to be identified, all the identification of the status of those had to be carried out. What you see represented there is the transboundary areas. We are doing very well in bringing the countries together, creating the forum, but we, like every other river basin, have problems. We have pollution, particularly from nitrates within this region. From diffuse sources is a key factor affecting the quality of groundwater resources. We have agricultural activities that are major contributors to that. We have a variety of locations where there's non-sewered pollution that is being discharged and coming into and affecting groundwater sources. We have urban land use that is affecting groundwater in the area around urban situations. These pressures need to be reduced, they need to be eliminated, they need to be incorporated an action program to prevent them from continuing the damage to that groundwater body. The goal is all the groundwater bodies and surface water to have a good status. We have sources of pollution which you see listed here, which again I won't go into details of, and again you'll get further details of that. But each of the countries has provided an assessment of the problems and the sources of those, and collectively in the regional context, these are the principal problems that are affecting groundwater resources. The definition of good status of water in the or groundwater in the Water Framework Directive is also incorporating the concept of quantity. You can't use something that is finite at a rate that doesn't allow it to be replenished. And that basic principle is within the directive. It is one that within the Danube River Basin we have a significant amount of, or significant number of locations where groundwater is being used at a rate beyond which is being recharged. And the expected developments in this region need to be taken account of. There are development plans. You heard from Serbia, the minister this morning, that significant areas, Serbia as a country not irrigating significantly, wanting to increase that, undertaking analysis of where that can be done. And the River Basin Management Plan is the basis under which we should be able to do that, and we should be able to do it in a way that achieves a stable circumstance related to groundwater quantity. I will just quickly show you the status of groundwaters. Again, I think in the interest of time, I won't go into a lot of details because the presentation, and again, an encouragement to get up again tomorrow morning early at 9 o'clock, is the presentation on the details of the work of the Groundwater Task Group of the ICPDR. But here you see the status, the green being those water bodies that are in good status from a chemical point of view. The reds being those that, these are transboundary groundwater bodies, the reds being those where they are not meeting the conditions that they should. This has been supplemented with the groundwater status related to quantity, and you see here then the picture of the groundwater status related to quantity, and again the areas where there are some difficulties that have been identified. The dark greens being with high confidence, the lighter greens being with lower confidence, more data being needed. As I mentioned, the River Basin Management Plan outlined what we need to do, because the point isn't just to identify where we've got problems, it's to figure out, okay, what do we have to do to make sure that we don't, in the long run, have those problems. And that is what is in this document, the River Basin Management Plan, that is supported by, again to emphasize, supported by and reinforced by those actions at a national level which have to happen. Each country has those. In the case of the Danube, and this is really a compliment to the people of Serbia, that even though there was not a legal obligation to do so, many of the key elements of the Water Framework Directive were done, although all the countries of the Danube committed to do that and were able to take major steps forward in achieving most of the procedures that need to be carried out in all parts of the region, even without the legal obligation to do so. We have, though, identified visions and management objectives for the problems that have been identified. We've developed measures at a basin-wide scale, and we are also looking to try to find funding. And there is what is called the Joint Program of Measures, which is outlined in here. And I will just quickly give you the visions for groundwater for this region, which are that the emissions of polluting substances do not cause any deterioration of groundwater quality in the Danube River Basin District. And where the pollution has already had impacts, to restore that water body to good quality. Related to quantity, it's a matter of having an appropriate balance of extraction and recharge, and the making sure that the conditions for groundwater are taking account of the impacts of climate change. We are in the process of undertaking a major assessment of the impacts of climate change on the Danube River Basin, and one of the sectors that will be affected by that is water supply, and the groundwater resources, as you heard from Mr. Dimkic earlier, being very significantly used for water supply in this region. In addition to the visions, there is the objectives, the very specific detailed objectives that have been identified for the particular measures needed in connection with groundwater quality. Again, I won't read them here, but it is basically measures to address those pollutant inputs that are affecting the groundwater bodies, and particularly both for surface and groundwater, we have significant organic and nutrient pollution issues that need to be addressed, and there are combined measures for both surface and groundwater. And these issues are often not separable from the point of view there's only a measure for groundwater as opposed to surface water. They are often interchangeable, and actions that improve the surface water are also then going to improve the groundwater. The treatment efficiency, we are hoping to improve the best available techniques utilization, and a reduction of the pesticide, biocide use within this region. The region actually is, you would say, on the low side of pesticide use because of the economic circumstances that have existed in the region, or a good portion of the region, for the last 10 years, where large amounts of money have not been available for significant purchase of pesticides, and that has been advantaged. But as the region develops, the potential concern is that pesticides are used in increasing volumes and again do affect groundwater. In addition, specifically for non-EU member states, there's the hope that the directives that do exist can be applied even though they're, again, not legally obligations to do so, but to use the directives and to put in place the measures, even if it is not formally under the directive. Many countries, such as Serbia, are redoing their water laws to incorporate these directives in anticipation of joining the European Union and creating the basis for doing so, and these need to be put in place. The over-extraction of groundwater bodies, the quantity issues are extremely important, and as you saw, there are some water bodies that are being extracted at a greater rate than they are being recharged, and that needs to be avoided and stopped, and that applies both within the EU and in the non-EU countries. The final things that I would say is that we do have significant problems with nitrate contamination in the region, very significant localized problems, and these issues have to be addressed through the implementation of the Nitrates Directive and the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, those supporting pieces of legislation to the Water Framework Directive. And finally, to make sure that the measures that are identified are put in place, we as a Secretariat and the Commission itself is looking to see that we do what we've said we're going to do. Whether we'll be able to do all of it by the year 2015, which is the goal, or not, I'm not sure, but we certainly want to maintain and create the positive momentum to addressing one after another these problems, and every location being part of the big picture puzzle that makes up an overall picture. And if we're able to, at each localized situation, get improvement, we will have an overall situation of very good circumstances of water in the Danube River Basin. The final item that I would encourage you to do, if you have not done so before and want additional information about the work that is ongoing at the ICPDR, you can visit our website where all the documents of our Commission are publicly available. It is one of the conditions that is necessary, I think, if we are to build the public support for the kind of measures that are needed, that in some cases are expensive, that the information about the situation has to be available. And again, I would like at the conclusion here on behalf of our presidency this year, which is Ukraine, to thank all of the people of the ICPDR family. We use that word to thank you for your contributions to the work that I have presented. And as I've said, you will hear further information about that in the presentations that follow on later today, the specifics of the groundwater task group. But I hope that this presentation has given you an overview of how a strategic approach has been taken to addressing water quality problems and where groundwater fits into that. Thank you very much.